Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. Next up on our team previews is the national runner-up Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And joining us on the channel today is Tim O'Malley. Tim, welcome to the show.
Connor, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the position group breakdown here for the Fighting Irish, Tim, please tell our viewers where they can find your content.
Yeah, irishillustrated.com on the 24/7 Sports Network, and Twitter would be at Tim O'Malley ND. And yeah, Irish Illustrated, we're chock full of content each summer, so it's a good thing to stop by. And then, of course, it gets a lot more fun in July, the content, because you can start to feel the season coming. But we have you covered until then as well.
And the anticipation to every single Notre Dame season is high quality stuff. So we'll start getting into it right now with the position group breakdowns, starting at the quarterback position. And there has certainly been a lot of talk with the Fighting Irish quarterback room this year. You look with Steve Angeli entering the transfer portal, ultimately going to Syracuse, and then you have a couple of youngsters battling it out there. So we'll go back to the spring though. Why do you think Steve Angeli hit the portal? And then what does this quarterback room look overall to you?
Yeah, I think CJ Carr had a leg up going in the coaches' minds into the spring, but the real key I think was that Kenny Minchey, from my purview, was third. And I think Kenny Minchey in the spring became a legitimate contender for it, which clouds the picture a little bit for Steve Angeli. If you can't tell Steve as a senior with 2 years left, we think you're 1A going into the summer, but you still have to earn it. If you're anything along the lines of 2A or especially 2B, then you got to look elsewhere for 2 years. I know he would have had chopped off his left hand to start at Notre Dame for a season, but I think that is why they must have told him, we don't think it will be you. We would, of course, love you to stay and compete longer. But at that point, he's a Notre Dame graduate. He can now go try to start for 2 years, and he found a good landing spot in Syracuse. I know they lost a lot of their production from last season, but it's not like he's dropping down to group of five either. And it's getting interesting because now Syracuse is senior day at Notre Dame. So Steve Angeli will be
Right.
going to another senior day at Notre Dame.
It's kind of crazy there. That's the world of college football
Yes,
nowadays.
he doesn't have to sit out. So that's why that's the big change.
Right. So when there's a situation like that, you have your perceived number one quarterback, at least if you were to look at coming out of the college football playoff, the national championship. Steve Angeli had that key drive right before the end of the first half against Penn State. And so you're thinking, okay, so he has the experience now, CJ Carr and the quarterback room overall, young, but they have a very high ceiling. And so they're kind of raw here, but and then you have the Steve Angeli guy. So Steve Angeli is like you know what you're going to get out of him quarterback, but he may not provide as high of a ceiling later down the line. Is that the kind of thought maybe the coaching staff was having here? Plus, they probably want to go with more of a running quarterback, knowing that system, right?
Well, if it's Kenny Minchey, it'll be more of a running quarterback. CJ Carr is not a runner. Now he's a better runner than Steve Angeli. He would not in any way resemble Kenny Minchey, or certainly none of them resemble Riley Leonard running the football like that. But
No.
Carr is the most gifted passer. Minchey would be the dual threat. And Angeli is steady as they come. I mean, I talked to him in the spring, like, his career stats are 70, it's backup role and one start in the Sun Bowl. 72%, 10 touchdowns, one pick. Then he puts that drive together where it's the most important drive of the season for Notre Dame because they're getting shut out going to the half. That momentum was huge to make it 10-3. And remember, they ended up going ahead 17-10. Uh,
Yep.
at that point, I thought he is probably going to try and stay and fight, but like he would have had a lot of suitors at that point too. So I think he really, really wanted to win that job outright, and when he couldn't, he basically had no other recourse. It's not like they would have said, "You got to leave. You're number three." That didn't. Even if he was number three, they would say, "If you want to leave, we understand it, but you might win. You could still win a role here." I just don't think it was enough for him going to his senior year, and also he already graduated from Notre Dame too. He was graduating early.
Right. And at this point in his career, he's trying to get some playing time.
Yes, yes,
He's already
yes.
been sitting on the bench long enough.
He's not seen failure, so let's see if he can have some success and become a professional in some way.
Exactly. Well, regardless, so who do you think is ultimately going to be the starting quarterback? Is it CJ Carr's job to lose at this point?
I think it's Carr. It's not fair for us to say it's his job to lose because we saw very, very little of spring ball. We had a lot of interviews, but we saw very little of practice. But at Irish Illustrated, we have maintained that CJ Carr is the leader in the clubhouse going into the summer. Summer months are important because those guys, those quarterbacks got to get players together for informal workouts. Of course, there's some formal workouts now. Um, I just, you're playing Miami at Miami and A&M to start. I don't think Marcus Freeman is going to want this competition to go past August 10th. Is that fair to say? Because then you have a 2 weeks of straight preparation before you get into game week. These quarterbacks split reps in the spring 3 ways. So sometimes Freeman told us guys would get 12 reps in a practice. You can't do that in August where you're just getting 20, say 22 reps in practice. You have to figure out
Right.
who your starter is going to be. You got to make a choice and hope. I think the key is they hope that somebody makes that choice obvious for them.
Yeah, and you got a pretty big game there in week one against the
Yeah.
Miami Hurricanes. And yeah, we spoke with David Lake of the Hurricanes, and he was talking about how it's going to be a very interesting battle, especially at the line of scrimmage. And I was like, you know what? We got to get a sky cam view for that game because the line of
Yes.
scrimmage battle is going to be insane in that game. Of course, we got a lot of great skill players, and we'll let that be the transition to the Notre Dame running back room. Now, if you're talking about position groups, best position groups in the
Yeah.
country, this one would rank right up there because you have your top guy with Jeremiah Love, but the depth here is also of high quality. So, Tim, please preview this Notre Dame running back room.
Yeah, Jeremiah Love's the best player Notre Dame's had returning to its program in 35 years, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, Manti Te'o had a great senior year, but he didn't enter that way. Maybe you could say Brady Quinn, but Jeremiah Love is, for our money, one of the greatest Notre Dame running backs of all time. And maybe the best running back in the country last year is probably Genty. Jeremiah Love, I thought, was even a better pro prospect than, well, it wasn't probably Genty. It was Genty, but I thought Jeremiah Love was probably even a better pro prospect then. Remember what he did against Penn State, that Walter Payton-like run? That's with the sprained MCL. He had the 98-yarder against IU where he wasn't even healthy. You could see him coasting in at the end. He is a fantastic football player, and it's rare that a guy that doesn't get overhyped at Notre Dame when he's that good. You cannot overhype him. He does everything well. And then Jadarian Price, I hate it when people say he'd start for every team in the other team in the country because you don't know people's running back rooms. That guy'd start for about 120 teams, and he
Yeah,
is another game breaker. And what makes him valuable is, I mean, he's going to get 12 carries. He's fresh, and he is a true game breaker when he hits that second level. And then you have Aeneas Williams, who helped beat Penn State last year as a true freshman. He's the versatile one. He's a lot like Kyron Williams. I don't think he probably has Kyron Williams' underrated speed. Like Kyron Williams didn't have a good 40 time, but he always ran away from everybody. It was kind of one of those weird things where you're like, well, it says he's not that fast, and yet no one ever catches him. That's three deep right there. And they even have a guy coming up, Kedron Young, that they kept. And returning a person, Jabron Payne, who used to be the third down back ahead of Audric Estime. All these
man.
guys stayed, and it's shocking that all these guys stayed. But Love is the key. If you lose Love, it becomes a very good running back room that can help you get to the playoffs. Love
Right.
is the guy that can be a differentiator in any playoff game.
Right. And you mentioned in the day and age of the transfer portal, how did
Shocking.
Notre Dame keep all these guys?
It's stunning. I mean, their NIL goes to retention, obviously more than it goes to getting players in the portal. They get good players in the portal, but look, there was no Leonard for six. There was no Leonard for 7 figures. There was no Sam Hartman for 7 figures. So retention, retention, retention. I'm guessing Jeremiah Love commanded that to stay in town. But you think about it, though, there's just that's part of it. But also, we're going to get to this later. If I was one of those running backs, I would want to run behind Notre Dame's offensive line instead of, like in Jabron Payne's case, a Mac line. In Jadarian Price's case, probably a lot of lines you want to choose, but Notre Dame is still. Price was the key to hang on to because he could have gone and helped, as I said, 95% of teams in college football.
Yeah.
But you can help Notre Dame with Jeremiah Love. You can go to the NFL without that wear and tear on your body that they used to have when you're a college running back, when you leave with 800 career carries or 1,000 career carries
Right.
that they just don't have anymore. This is about Love, but we actually spoke to him before last year. Like, is it, you're splitting time. He's like, I was recruited to split time. I told them I don't want wear and tear. They are preparing me for the NFL, and that's a unique recruiting move by Notre Dame to tell running backs, you are not going to be the only running back. You are going to be the only running back when you get to the NFL. I think that's a
Mm.
great idea by them, and I think they've bought into it. You can tell there's no such thing as 20, 25 carries anymore with
Right.
those guys.
Well, and you briefly said those running backs are going to appreciate running behind the Notre Dame offensive line. So last year, I mean, this was like famously known as a very inexperienced
Yes.
unit, and
Yeah.
everybody was like hammering the under against A&M because it's like, oh, those defensive ends for the Aggies, the pass rush, this inexperienced offensive line, and then they ended up holding it pretty well. And of course, Riley Leonard was the best quarterback in the country at avoiding sacks, and so that
Yes.
obviously helped with it. But the offensive line last year ended up holding pretty well. Of course, it's Notre Dame, obviously, and they normally do pretty well up front. So this year they obviously have more returning production and a little bit more experienced, and it's an overall pretty young room when you look to the two and the three deep. What are your thoughts on the starting group, and does Notre Dame like their depth up front?
Yeah, I think last year's depth was really impressive because if you were in the offseason here, they lost three guards that had started and a center. So two guards and a center. Pat Coogan started at center. But because Ashton Craig got hurt last year, who is now back starting, Rocco Spindler started at guard. But because Billy Schroth got hurt last year, who is now back starting, and then Sam Pendleton started at guard, but he was then beaten out as the season progressed. So Notre Dame kind of lost a potential part-time starter and some depth. But those guys would help your team. If this is the NFL, you want to keep those guys in your team. Nowadays in college, they're getting more money to play for IU and Nebraska and other places to start. Of course, they're going to go. The line, it's almost as if the guys that played last year, Emil Wagner, who had zero career starts, Anthony Knapp, who was a true freshman, they played 15 and 16 games at tackle. Knapp got hurt in the semifinal. It's almost like they played 2 years of football. Like these guys have now played Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State in high leverage games. They are no longer young players. I know Knapp is a true sophomore. He's gone all the way through the college football playoff. Emil Wagner set a record for snaps at Notre Dame last year. Of course, they've never played that many games before, 16 games, but he started them all. Billy Schroth has now and Ashton Craig, they have about 5 career starts and 8 career starts between the two of them. But those were the guys that they were counting on last year, the two of the best players last year. They just happened to get hurt against Purdue in week 3. So now they're back. Schroff came back during the year. And then Charles Jagusa is the most talented of them all. He was going to start at left tackle last year. He got hurt in early August, came back because they played in the playoff. And we asked Joe Rudolph going into the playoff game against IU, so is Jagusa really available to you? He's listed on the two deep. And he's like, oh, yeah. And you don't believe it because he tore a pectoral muscle. So you're like, he's not going to play.
Right.
He starts in the national championship game at guard, a position he had never played, and had to fill in against Penn State, who had a heck of a front seven.
Yep.
That guy's going to be a great player. They love their line. I would say the depth took a hit because if you lose three guys that have started, your depth all in the interior, your depth took a hit. They like what they have in Sullivan Absher behind them. After that, I think they're young. A lot of Notre Dame fans thought Gerby Lambert, a redshirt freshman, could beat out Knapp at left tackle. He was injured in the spring and is going to miss a lot of the summer. So Lambert will be the first tackle off the bench when healthy. Gerby Lambert looks like an NFL tackle now, and he's 19, whereas Anthony Knapp kind of looks like a college center. So I think that's why Notre Dame fans wanted that position to kind of switch around.
Yeah, you
But
you mentioned that frame, 6'7", 335.
oh,
Yeah.
and he's all of it too. It's not one of those. Yeah, you look at him and even sitting down, you're like, wow, that guy's going to be in the NFL. Here's what it looks like because I talked to him before Notre Dame played Georgia, and then I saw Georgia's team walk in. I thought, they all look like Gerby Lambert. Now Notre Dame ended up getting the best of those linemen, but that Georgia line was huge, and that is what you need in modern college football: guys that can move and that are that big.
Yeah, the difference between the national championship contenders and the really to very good teams, the line of scrimmage, and then the depth and just the body
Yeah,
types up front.
I could not believe. I mean, I know Notre Dame did a great job against Georgia for 60 minutes. They kind of won all three phases, but I was amazed looking at Georgia walk into that room, and that's what they always look like, and that's what Ohio State looked like, and Notre Dame has gotten there in many cases, but. It's looks I guess can be deceiving because Notre Dame won up front against Georgia, but holy smokes, that's what you want. That's what you want your room to look like, and I guess that's why they all got drafted too.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and Georgia, not just on the defensive line, but that linebacker room for the near
Yeah.
future is scary good. Yeah. So looking at the Notre Dame receiving core and the last few handful of years, I wouldn't say this group has been elite.
No, no.
But th this year, I assume that the floor is at least higher. They bring back some experience. Jaden Greathouse is potentially a more consistent threat this year. He played pretty well in the playoff. And then an intriguing transfer portal get, in my opinion, is Malachi Fields from Virginia. So, Tim, what are your thoughts on the Notre Dame receiving corps?
It's funny with Malachi Fields, where he came to Notre Dame on senior day that Virginia played Notre Dame, and we were watching the game. And everybody in the press box is like, guy looked pretty good in a Notre Dame uniform next year because he just looks the part of a boundary receiver. He reminds me a little of Miles Boykin, who was at Notre Dame in 2018, and of course tested off the charts. Yeah, with Fields and Jaden Greathouse, who, it took him a while to get going last year, but the funny
Yeah,
thing is his two best games of his life are the championship game and the semifinal. So that's the good way to go. It's better than Army Navy for your best games when your best
right.
games are Penn State and Ohio State. So there's a lot of faith in Greathouse. They brought in Will Pauling from Wisconsin. He'll play some slot, but that's where Greathouse plays as well. According to Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, slot and X, the field receiver position, are pretty much interchangeable in his offense. So he'll use the guys that way. And the fourth guy is Jordan Faison, who Notre Dame fans are well aware of because he's a lacrosse star and kind of broke on the scene a couple years ago against Louisville. That's the four. They need five or six, and it seems like Elijah Burris, a freshman early enrollee who's the son of Plaxico. Now, he's not built like Plaxico. He's more of the 6'1", 185 guy. If he was built like Plaxico, we wouldn't be having this conversation because he would be a starting wide receiver. But
Right.
he is the guy that I think will break into the rotation. He had a really good spring. It also speaks to Notre Dame's recruiting of receivers before him. I think he can elevate above the guys they have there.
And then they bring in another intriguing transfer from Wisconsin, formerly at Cincinnati, Will Pauling. Do you think he's going to be probably fourth, fifth here?
Yeah, I think he's just such a productive player, and he was there all spring. I think that helps a lot because Fields has to come in the summer. A lot of people don't know this, but Bo Collins did this for Notre Dame last year. He had not fully graduated as a senior. He wasn't behind schedule. He was a senior at Clemson. You can't practice for Notre Dame until you've graduated at your college. So Fields had to do that as well. So Fields wasn't there in the spring. Big summer for him. Pauling was. I think the initiation there really helped. So he's the veteran guy that I think you can count on to move the chains. Faison's more of that quick twitch, can help you in a lot of ways. Explosive player, explosive special teams player too. Those are the four. Burris is my choice from what I've seen is the fifth. They have some other guys. KK Smith is a junior that they could really run, but he's been inconsistent. And then the guy, I should not omit him. Micah Gilbert is a redshirt freshman. He was the Elijah Burris of last year, where everyone thought, oh, he's going to break in the rotation. He had some issues in camp with drops, and then he had a garbage time is the right word, I guess. The game was over. A garbage time drop bomb touchdown that Steve Angeli put the ball here and here, running full speed
Oh,
on the post. I don't know if he ever truly recovered from that, whereas because he did do a 4-game red shirt after that. I think it was a big,
psychologically.
yeah, it was, and he wasn't really breaking in the rotation the way many people thought he would anyway. They shortened that rotation because of so many running backs. They used tight ends last year, 3 tight ends. So he is a guy that could ascend this year, but he was out of sight, out of mind in the spring. First practice, he broke 2 fingers. As a wide receiver, that hurts your spring. So
Yeah.
he needs a big summer, and I think Burris stepped into kind of that role in his stead.
Is there an alpha in this room, you think?
It maybe if Fields comes and is. I don't know if Fields had. I didn't follow Fields in that way in the locker room. I know he's well respected in that locker room. It could be Greathouse just because nationally everybody knows Jaden Greathouse now, which is crazy because nobody would have before the Penn State game. But he was the best. Jeremiah Smith was the best receiver on the field. Jaden Greathouse was the other one. Jaden Greathouse was the best receiver on the field in the Penn State game, and it wasn't even close. So
Right.
I think, yeah, it would be one of those two. Not a true alpha though. No, I don't think they have that situation.
Gotcha. Well, Great House was one of the only receivers to catch a pass in that Penn State game when you look
Yeah,
at
yes.
it.
Oh, yeah. I remember Notre Dame's corners on the field with about a minute left. Leonard Moore, the true freshman, who was one of their best players on the team, walking right up to the Penn State receiver and going like this. None of them had a catch on Penn State's on the wide receivers that game.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
such a crazy stat. And the
It's
fact that Penn
insane
State
in a
still almost
semifinal.
won.
It's
Yeah.
crazy in a semifinal.
So the tight end room, they haven't really stayed healthy for the Fighting Irish here recently. Do you think that this group has a high ceiling this year?
Not as high as Notre Dame normally has. Everyone likes Eli Raridan. He's a great athlete.
Yeah.
He tore his ACL at the end of his senior year. He tore his ACL again at Notre Dame. This is his first year fully removed from that injury. He looked great in the spring. He has to have a really good year. Ty Washington is Arkansas transfer that will help for sure in the blocking game. He was the other guy that was not here in the spring. He was graduating from Arkansas. So they're looking forward to him doing that. But they really are going to miss is Cooper Flanagan played all last year as the number 3 tight end. But we talked about receivers. They played 3 tight ends, not 5 wide receivers. So
Right.
Flanagan is out for the season. Achilles tendon. It was either the IU game or the practices after the IU game. But if you think about that, that's December 21st. Achilles tendon. I mean, I suppose he could help in the playoff situation, but Achilles tendons, you're not coming back in an 8 month period to play football. So I would assume he gets a hard red shirt there. He actually needs a hard red shirt because he played as a true freshman for Hartman in 23 and as a sophomore last year. So it helps his career a little to do a full red shirt. Although you can play 4 games, of course, nowadays.
So looking at the Notre Dame offense overall, is there any position group where you look at and say, we got to stay healthy there?
Tight end. I think tight end because with Raridan there, Flanagan out, Raridan there. Kevin Bauman is a 6th-year guy. He came in with Michael Mayer. That's how long he's been there now.
Wow.
He,
Yeah.
yeah, he broke his fibula in 2021. He tore his ACL in 2022. He tore his ACL in 2023. He was healthy last year, but those 3 injuries will slow you down. I think they can count on him for special teams and maybe a little spot duty as a block. He's a 23-year-old man blocking, so he's always been an aggressive blocker anyway. But that's not Eli Raridan. If Eli Raridan goes down, he's not stepping in and all of a sudden catching 40 passes, Kevin Bauman or anybody else. So I think tight end has to stay healthy. I actually thought that was the one position they go after in the spring in the portal. They do have James Flanagan coming in from Wisconsin as a freshman. They're very high on. There aren't many freshman tight ends that succeed at Notre Dame, but Michael Mayer is one of them. It's still like you need Eli Raridan and you need to stay healthy in the tight ends room.
Michael Mayer was just that dude, though. He was just
Yes, he
different.
was. He really was. And it was weird. Remember, it was 2020. They did not, their best receivers were transferred. Ben Skoranek came from Northwestern.
Yeah.
When your best receivers are Ben Skoranek and a freshman, and you go to the playoff, maybe we should give Brian Kelly a little more credit than we gave him in that one because that's a pretty good effort. But yeah, Michael Mayer is a different cat. I mean, you could say when he got on campus like that, he's starting. He's one of the better players on offense right there.
And really, that 2020 Notre Dame team, I mean, they had a really good defense, but that offensive line was
Yes, that was offensive line and Kyron Williams, and they leaned into their strengths all the way. And Tommy Tremble was on that team, the Carolina Panthers tight end. So you had 6 offensive linemen because the way he blocked downfield was another offensive lineman, only he could run.
yeah, yeah, that was one of the best blocking teams I've seen in my short 25-year life.
That's right.
So looking over to the Fighting Irish defense, so last year this was a veteran-laden group coming into the season. Then they had some injuries. I never really thought that they could have hit a higher ceiling. As good as they
Yeah,
were, they could have even been better had they stayed healthy. But nonetheless, I think the coaching staff deserves all the credit in the world because the fact that they couldn't stay healthy and that you barely noticed it. Like if I had told you, hey guys, Notre Dame's defense was not even fully healthy this year at really at hardly any point, really, and they were still like a top three, top four defense in college football. So, I mean, this is going to be an elite unit once again. And as our time on the Zoom meeting here runs down
I
under
saw.
10
That's
minutes,
the first time I've seen that before.
yeah, I don't have the paid version yet,
Yeah.
so we're kind of on a strict timer here. But overall, so the defensive front six, front seven. Do you think that there's any alphas, guys that are just going to take over and be that difference maker, all American kind of player?
It's not like it was last year where going into the season you had Riley Mills in his 5th year and Howard Cross in his 6th. Cross was a returning Walter Camp All-American. But they are deep this year. I think they're going to go 5 deep on the interior, and both edges can go 3 deep. Bryce Young, Bryant Young's son, is a freak of nature on the strong side. You mentioned the injuries. Boubacar Traore, Viper, Jordan Botello, Viper. Those guys missed October, November in the playoffs. Notre Dame did that without a real true pass rush. And the guy that's filled in, Junior Tuihalamaka, is still there. They are 3 deep at Viper, 3 deep on the edges. They have 5 in the interior. It's going to be interior by committee. If anyone steps forward, I think it would be Gabriel Rubio, who just has not been able to put together a fully healthy season in South Bend, but 6'5", 315. He's got that frame to maybe become an alpha inside. He's not that yet.
So overall, with this defensive front, it's Notre Dame, so you kind of take this with a grain of salt. But like, is there any like worry, concern, or is it more like we just may not have like an All American here?
Yeah, the strength is in the pack. They might have an All-American. You're probably jumping ahead a year in Bryce Young as a true sophomore, but I mean, he's legit 6'7", 265, 270, and he can run. Traore would be a preseason All-American had he not been injured last year against Miami of Ohio. That was September 28th. Coming back from ACL, so September 28th ACL. I don't know if that means translates to All-American, but what if it translates to Traore and Bryce Young are All-Americans if you only count October, November, and going forward? Because you develop as a young player and young, you get your knee back and fully confidence in Traore. The issue there is the hard games are September, so they have to be very good in September too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point there with the schedule. And but yeah, if they're fully healthy, you can imagine them having that first to second year kind of leap. So,
Yes, yeah, yeah. Those are really talented players on the edge.
and so the linebacker room, they lose their top guy, but they bring up back a lot of depth. I would
Yeah.
imagine this room will only be better.
Yes, this it will be better. Jack Kaiser. The one issue is I bring this up a lot. Al Golden said what you guys don't understand about Kaiser is he solves problems on the grass. That means in game he sees a problem, he adjusts it for everybody else. That is something you don't have unless you have the experience to do it. So athletically speaking, ceiling is way higher. They have four legitimate starters for 2.5 spots because they play a nickel. So I was surprised some of the reserve linebackers didn't leave either because they're just not that great of a path to playing time. But they'll rely on at least four. And I think Kingston Asa, the sophomore, there's another one. Does he arrive early? Can he be a third team All-American as a sophomore? I think they're that good at the linebacker position. And they'll be fun to watch. They're a very versatile group.
Yeah. I remember a few years ago, the last few years really, the way I've been looking at the Notre Dame linebacking core is like a little bit of a limited ceiling from like
Yeah.
2021 to 2023-ish. And then, but like really high floor, they had experienced guys that were going to
Right.
do their
Right.
job. But now it's like, okay, they have a high floor and now they have a higher ceiling.
I
So,
agree. I
so
completely agree with that. Yeah. And, we underrated some of those players because they're all in the NFL now. They were third, fourth, and fifth round picks. But I still think you're right. I still think that it was more impressive of a high floor than the ceiling was going to be anywhere. They are, but JD Bertrand, Maris Leafau, and then Kaiser, all drafted in the middle rounds. Pretty impressive, but boy, these guys could be drafted higher.
yeah, and real quick for our viewers, take it with a grain of salt when we say, like, for teams like Notre Dame, Georgia, Alabama, etc., Oregon, Texas, when we say, they don't have as high of a ceiling or they have a higher floor, it's
Right.
different compared to most teams when we say
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
So,
you're comparing Notre Dame players to Jalen Smith. You're comparing Ohio State players to the best of the best. It is a different situation.
so with the Fighting Irish secondary here, I see a lot of freshmen and sophomore in the two deep. So, what are your thoughts overall in this room? Is it just as high of a ceiling as last year?
Last year had the returning National Defensive Player of the Year and Xavier Watts. You want to talk about solving problems on the grass and probably on the sidelines and when the ball's in the air. Xavier Watts will be missed. He's 13 picks in his final 2 years. He was the most productive safety at Notre Dame. I mean, I know he's not going to be a better pro, but he was a better college safety than Kyle Hamilton. He was just did more things. He was better. He was more productive.
I
Hamilton, of
agree.
course, got hurt, but he was a great player. They have to replace him. Leonard Moore, who replaced Benjamin Morrison. I cannot believe they got better at corner when Benjamin Morrison went down. It's insane how good Leonard Moore became. Obviously, the two of them would have been great together.
Yeah.
But Christian Gray is back. But Leonard Moore is probably the second most talented player on the team behind Love. I really like the secondary, but when you say they can't afford an injury somewhere, it would be the other returning safety, Adon Schuler, because I think he takes the step up into leadership role. He was a breakout young player last year. He has to be a breakout actual player. Does that make sense? Like, oh,
Yes.
he's really good for a redshirt freshman. Now he just has to be really good all the time.
Last year he was the hunter. Now he's going to be the hunted.
Yes. Yeah. You're like, wow, he's ahead of schedule. Well, now stay ahead of schedule. Now,
Right.
now look like you're going pro after your junior year, even though you only played 2 years. That's what I think they need in the secondary. The corner tandem is as good as any in the country. And the guy to watch for Notre Dame fans, if they hadn't paid attention to Irish Illustrated, true sophomore Carson Hobbs, backup corner. He's on Christian Gray's side of the field. He tells us he is not short of confidence. He tells us he's the fastest player on the team. And I asked him, what about number four, which meant Jeremiah Love? And he
Yeah.
looked at me like I was crazy. So he believes he's the fastest player on the team. And then we watched him in the blue goal game, and he was outstanding in coverage. He's a guy that could really help as a third corner.
So Hobbs might be like the Leonard Moore of last year.
Yeah, that's I mean that's possible. I mean you figure Leonard Moore is a unicorn the way he came and played last year, but you need three, and I think Carson Hobbs gives them three. And of course, their nickel will be people think, well, can he just play nickel? The nickel is Alabama grad transferred Devontae Smith, and Notre Dame fans have to get ready for it's not the real Devontae Smith. We like to joke, but Devontae Smith came in and he easily won that nickel role. He'll be a very important player in the unit.
Yeah, if he's that Devontae Smith,
Yeah, that
we
would
might
be
be
a
looking
little.
at a two-way player
Like,
and
go ahead and
every.
play Hobbs at corner and put Devontae Smith at wide receiver. Everything will be just fine at Notre Dame.
So, when looking at the 2025 Notre Dame Fighting Irish, what is the overall expectation for the team this season, do you think?
I think playoff is the floor. Expectation is host that playoff game because then you should win it. And then, of course, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're in the quarterfinals against Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, or Texas, you got to go out and win the football game, right? It can be
Yeah.
disappointing if you lose that game, but that is, I think, an expectation is you're back in the quarterfinals, you're back on that big day of football where there's 8 teams left and they're all squaring off in a 2-day period in the major bowls. That's the expectation. It's never gravy to win those games, but if you're just being realistic, it's a first-year starter quarterback. If Notre Dame does what I just said and they're 13-1 and they go into a quarterfinal and they lose to Texas, is that a bad season? Of course it's not a bad season. They did a great job. I do think Notre Dame fans would be pretty upset if you hit that loss in that first round playoff game now, especially if it's at home. And I actually don't think they would lose a home playoff game to anyone. The way that crowd was insane for Indiana. If you bring in Oregon or something along those lines, it will be nuts in South Bend. But I think win a playoff game is the expectation, a realistic expectation for me. And then, of course, you have some faith for the first time ever because Marcus Freeman won 2 massive games last year after the Indiana game.
Well, Tim, really good job previewing the Fighting Irish. One last time for our viewers, tell them where they can find your content.
Yeah, IrishIllustrated.com. Our podcast is Irish Illustrated Insider. And then for my Twitter handle, at Tim O'Malley, ND.
Well, Tim, thank you so much for being on the channel, and we'll look to have you on again this time next year. You did a really good job.
All right, thanks a lot, Connor. Enjoy.